Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the SAREUM Holdings PLC Annual General Meeting. Throughout this recorded meeting, attendees online will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time using the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Just please simply type in your questions at any time and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question submitted today, given the attendance on today's call. However, all questions will be reviewed with responses published on the Investor Meet Company platform where it is appropriate to do so. It gives me great pleasure to hand over to Non-Executive Chairman, Dr. Stephen Parker. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Annual General Meeting of SAREUM Holdings PLC. I'm Stephen Parker, Chairman of the Board. A quorum, being 2 members, is present, and therefore we may now proceed with the business of the meeting. Because of the train strike today, we have also opened a link through the Investor Meet Company site in addition to the conventional meeting. I'm particularly grateful to those of you who have overcome the transport problems today to attend in person. We will take questions from the floor in the usual manner of our annual general meetings and try to cover some or all of the questions posed via the IMC site. I will therefore read through the resolutions together with the votes received. I should actually say not with the votes received, I'll explain in a second, and then provide the opportunity to remote shareholders to post questions, which the directors will endeavour to answer during the meeting. Any answers which we have been unable to provide immediately will be posted on the company's website within the next few days. I would now like to introduce the board. Starting from my extreme right, Clive Birch, the Senior Independent Director, Dr. Tim Mitchell, CEO.
Morning.
On my left, Dr. John Reader, CSO, and Dr. Mike Owen, who Non-Exec Director and Chair of the Remuneration Committee. I would now like to start the formal proceedings of this Annual General Meeting. The notice of Annual General Meeting was posted to shareholders on the 24th of November 2022. Accordingly, the requisite notice of the Annual General Meeting has been given. I propose, therefore, that with your consent, the notice of Annual General Meeting should be taken as read. Do you agree to that? Thank you. Before proceeding with the formal business of the meeting, I will now read a statement which was issued to the market this morning. The company made good progress in the financial year to the 30th of June 2022 and remains confident in its future despite some recent setbacks. SDC 1801 is SAREUM's TYK2/JAK1 inhibitor being developed as a potential new therapeutic for a range of autoimmune diseases with an initial focus on psoriasis, an autoimmune condition affecting the skin. As announced on the 8th of November 2022, the UK Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Authority informed SAREUM that it has not been able to approve the clinical trial authorization to evaluate the safety and tolerability of SDC 1801. The company can confirm that it provided a robust preclinical data package to support the CTA application in collaboration with several world-leading, internationally recognized contract research organizations. The MHRA has indicated that it requires an additional review by the UK Good Laboratory Practice Monitoring Authority as part of the preclinical data included in the application to approve the clinical study. SAREUM and its advisors have sought additional clarification from MHRA and the UK GLP on the next steps. In parallel with seeking clarification with the MHRA, the company is also assessing regulatory opportunities in other countries. SAREUM remains committed to SDC 1801 and is focused on finding the quickest and clearest pathway to obtaining authorization to commence clinical studies for the asset. TYK2/JAK1 inhibition has demonstrated benefits in maintaining a healthy immune system and has strong clinical validation in psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis, and we believe this asset has great potential. This week, we have seen evidence of the continued commercial interest in the TYK2 class following the announcement by Takeda of plans to acquire Nimbus's Lakshmi Inc., a unit of Nimbus Therapeutics, for an upfront consideration of $4 billion. We believe this underscores the great potential of this class. SDC 1802, SAREUM continues to work on the translational studies for 1802 needed to define the optimal cancer application prior to completing toxicology and manufacturing studies. Planning for such studies will incorporate what we have learned from our experience with 1801. The license program SRA737, which is the selective Czech inhibitor, as announced on the 12th of October 2022, SAREUM has been informed by Sierra Oncology Inc., now a subsidiary of GSK PLC, but it intends to return the rights of SRA737, the selective checkpoint 1 kinase inhibitor, to SAREUM's co-development partner, the CRT Pioneer Fund. The SRA737 license agreement has a 90-day notice period for termination, and therefore the company expects the rights to be formally returned in January 2023. SAREUM is evaluating the potential development opportunities for this asset with CPF and will provide further updates as appropriate. SRA737 was discovered and initially developed by scientists at the Institute of Cancer Research in collaboration with SAREUM, with funding from SAREUM and Cancer Research UK. In conclusion, the board believes SAREUM has a strong pipeline of kinase inhibitors which have the potential to provide great benefit to patients. The company is committed to advancing SDC-1801 into clinical development and is focused on finding the quickest and clearest pathway to obtaining authorization to commence clinical studies for the asset, whether it be in the UK or via the MHRA or other countries. The company also remains confident for the potential of SRA737 and now has the opportunity to be more closely involved in planning its future development. We would like to thank our shareholders, suppliers, contractors, and other stakeholders for their continued support and look forward to providing further updates on progress in due course. Before we turn to the resolutions, I would like to say a few words about the procedure, as this will again necessarily differ from previous years, in that only physical attendees are able to vote today, having received proxies from non-attending shareholders previously. Any shareholder listening through the IMC platform can only vote through the submission of proxies, and I hope you've already done so. I will propose each resolution in turn, having briefly summarized the content. I will then not read the results until the end of the meeting, because we will need to collect your proxies from those in the room and to make the quick calculations, but I hope to do that before the meeting finally closes. The directors will not answer questions relating to the individual rights of shareholders. Any shareholder who wishes to raise such a question should communicate with me or Dr. Mitchell by email following the meeting. I shall move on to the full business of the meeting and will now recite the resolutions. The full text of each of the resolutions is set out in the notice of annual general meeting, a copy of which is on the company's website. Resolutions 1 to 5 were proposed as ordinary resolutions, each requiring a simple majority of the votes cast to be in favour in order to be passed. Resolution 6 was proposed as a special resolution, requiring a majority of 75% of the votes cast to be in favour in order to be passed. Resolution 1. I proposed Resolution 1 in the notice of annual general meeting as an ordinary resolution to receive and adopt the report of the directors and financial statements for the financial year ended 30th of June 2022. Resolution 2. I propose Resolution 2 in the notice of annual general meeting as an ordinary resolution to receive and adopt the Remuneration Committee report for the year ended 30th of June 2022. Resolution 3 in the notice of annual general meeting is for the re-election of Dr. John Reader, who retires by rotation under sections 76 and 77 of the Articles of Association, and who, being eligible, offers himself for re-election as a director. Resolution 4 in the notice of annual general meeting is to confirm the appointment of Shipley's LLP as auditor of the company to hold office until the conclusion of the next AGM, at which accounts are laid before the company, and to authorize the directors to fix its remuneration. Resolution 5. I propose Resolution 5 in the notice of annual general meeting as an ordinary resolution that the directors be, and they are generally and unconditionally authorized for the purposes of Section 551 of the Companies Act 2006, the Act, to exercise all the powers of the company to allot shares in the company and to grant rights to subscribe for or convert any security into shares in the capital of the company up to an aggregate nominal amount of £850,000, 867, provided that this authority is for a period expiring at the conclusion of the company's next annual general meeting. But the company may, before such expiry, make an offer or agreement which would or might require shares to be allotted or such rights to be granted after such expiry, and the directors may allot shares and grants of such offer or agreement, notwithstanding that the authority conferred by this resolution has expired. This authority is in substitution of all earlier authorities to the extent unused. On the assumption that Resolution 5 is approved and passed, Resolution 6, I propose Resolution 6 in the Notice of Annual General Meeting as a special resolution that the directors be and they are empowered in accordance with Section 570 of the Act to allot equity securities as defined in Section 560 of the Act wholly for cash pursuant to the authority conferred by the previous resolution, as if Section 561 of the Act did not apply to any such allotment, provided that this power shall be limited to the allotment of equity securities. A, in connection with an offer of such securities by way of rights, open offer or preemptive offer, or holders of ordinary rights in proportion, as nearly as may be practical, to their respective holdings of such shares, but subject to such exclusions or other arrangements as the directors may deem necessary or expedient in relation to fractional entitlements or any legal or practical problems under the laws or any territory or the requirements of any regulatory body or stock exchange. And B, otherwise than pursuant to subparagraph A above, up to an aggregate nominal amount of £850,867, and shall expire on the conclusion of the next annual general meeting of the company after the passing of this resolution, save that the company may, before such expiry, make an offer or agreement which would or might require equity securities to be allotted after such expiry, and the directors may allot equity securities of any such offer or agreement, notwithstanding that the power conferred by this resolution has expired. Now, has everybody in the room had the chance to complete their proxy forms? If you haven't, I'd be grateful if you could do so at this stage, and then we'll get those collected so they can be summed together with the proxies already received in advance of the meeting. So that concludes the formal resolutions. I'd like to throw the meeting open to any questions that you may have in the room. Once we have answered your the questions in the room, we will then go to the online questions that have been posted. Richard, you're going to kick us off?
Could we have a little bit more clarity, if that's possible, around the issues regarding the CTA, which I think is probably the hot topic for the majority of investors?
Yep.
In terms of, are the board, is the board confident that plans are in place to provide us with the necessary progress to get 1801 into the clinic?
I would say we're absolutely confident. Yes.
Good. I won't ask for disclosure in that respect. Okay, because I mean there has been some comment, as you stated in the RNS, in terms of looking at other countries. It's got a possibility.
Yeah.
And obviously, the investors would be concerned if other countries are involved. Does that mean we start from square one in submitting an application for the CTA, or is there an element of rollover from the application we've already put in?
John, do you want to go into the leader?
There's an element of rollover in respect to the fact of the documentation that we've already prepared and submitted to MHRA to a large extent is ready to roll over directly to any other regulatory authority that we choose to approach. If there could, for example, be some foreign language translation requirements, so patient-facing documents. Right. If we go, so we are talking to an authority in Europe. Right. There would need to be some translation. That would be very rapid, quite short documents. The clinical trial protocol, if we were to change clinical research organisation, which we would need to if we go overseas, that would need to be developed with alongside that clinical research organisation. So we have a protocol that was ready to go with our Manchester group. It would need some change to just to accommodate their working practices, but
We have-
actually what we're proposing to do with the healthy subjects and the patients would not change, but there'd be some administrative changes to that documentation that would need to be made. But that would be a short period of time to get those documents ready.
Okay, so the issues that we're encountering in the UK with the MHRA are potentially not issues that we would encounter, hopefully, if we were to go to Europe, for instance.
We believe that's the case.
We believe so. The country that we've got in mind, in particular, we have a very strong reason to believe we would not encounter those difficulties that we've encountered with MHRA.
Okay, so not 100%, but a high degree of confidence that we will actually get the CTA through.
A high degree of confidence. I mean, I'm not going to say 100%,
No.
given our experience with MHRA, which came as a surprise. So let's put it that way.
Okay. In terms of the impact on 1802, presumably if we resolve the CTA issues for 1801, then that would clear the way for 1802 in exactly the same way, or are we anticipating that we'll have to make changes to the CTA application for 1802?
No, there will be no changes to the
No
CTA
changes.
application.
Okay, so this is like a once-in process issue that needs to be resolved.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. In a similar vein, in that case, not asking you to reveal plans, but with 737 due to come back into circulation in January, is it encouraging that we will have plans in place to actually get 737 back into the clinic?
Shall I take that? So part of the review process will be to go through the data pack that Sierra generated, I suppose with a fine-tooth comb, for us to assess the pros and cons of looking for a new licensed partner immediately versus doing a little bit more clinical work with it to progress it. But I don't think we'll be in a position to make that call until we've seen the minutiae of the details from the clinical study report, which we haven't had returned to us yet.
Right. Okay. But subject to encouraging data in that case, the intention would be to try and get it back into the clinic, presumably as a combo.
So if we were to progress into the clinic, yes, it would almost certainly be as a combination. I think the prudent thing for us to do would be to progress, both looking for a partner and consideration of clinical studies in parallel till one of those options becomes apparent as the best way forward.
Right. Okay. So in that case, we have to sort of wait and see what the data reveals before we can.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. But we should be getting that data back in January.
Yes. The process. I mean, it's sort of as soon as possible, as well, or without delay after that formal return date is. But I mean, it's an unwritten time, but it should be fairly prompt. It should be fairly quick that we get that data back.
Going back to TIC2 in that case, that Takeda news this week was obviously high profile. Does that give you confidence with TIC2, 1801, and 1802?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it was So for those who didn't see the announcement yesterday, Takeda. Well, we mentioned it in the report. So they bought essentially the TIC2 program from one of our competitors, Nimbus Therapeutics, for an enormous $4 billion, plus another $2 billion in sales milestones. So that was a product that had reached the end of phase 2B. So I suppose mid-stage clinical. So yeah, I mean, I think from our point of view, that shows the importance of TIC2 as a product area, and I suppose the increase in value on venturing into the clinic before doing a license deal. So I think that we're very encouraged by that, but by the size of that deal and the interest amongst the big pharma companies.
Interesting point you made that was a phase 2B
Yeah.
evaluation, which obviously we're a long way from.
Yeah.
But you have mentioned in previous statements looking at the different valuations placed TYK2 molecule. SAREUM's business model has always been to license preclinical.
Yes, preclinical or early clinical. Early clinical.
Or
Yeah.
early clinical.
Yeah.
Right, okay. So we certainly shouldn't be looking at changing the business model to take us into phase 2 or something like that.
Not at this stage, I would say. Yeah.
And the reason for designing the phase 1 study as a phase 1A and phase 1B, so that the phase 1B is actually carried out in patients, is that we would hope to see not a statistical significance, but perhaps a signal of efficacy, which may be enough to open conversations with at that stage.
Okay, so interesting, just maybe enough to open conversations. At the moment, I think you've been talking to potential licensees, partners, whatever. So presumably they're saying, show us some more before they commit.
I think it's show us some clinical data.
Yeah. I'm not going to hold the floor.
Yes. Gentleman, yeah.
Yes.
Just going back to colleague here's mentioned about the MHRA.
Yes.
Study that John mentioned that obviously tied up Manchester at the moment. Are we going to run parallel with that with any consideration? Obviously, I know there's also going to be GLP view. Are we still gearing that if that was to get concluded and positive that we're not just sat backwards on timelines again?
No, we're still committed to the process that we're in, but we're also very focused on the need to waste as little time and as little shareholder value as we can. And therefore, if it appears that the MHRA is not going to be the most effective route through, then we're looking at a plan A, plan B scenario so that we can very rapidly switch and go down an alternative track.
As you can imagine, snorting has already been chat, as always happens. And one of the things that I have picked up is that you're looking for the clearest and quickest way, but there will come a time when you need to make a decision.
Yeah.
And could I ask that if the decision is that you're going to go to another country, wherever that may be, but there is also some clear guidance on what you expect timelines to be? Because that's probably one of the biggest criticisms that's come out amongst investors, is that things are stated, to use my term, they're grey and woolly. We be a little bit more precise and clearer and sell ourselves a little bit better.
Well, we certainly want to do that. I mean, the one. I think it's widely recognised at the moment that MHRA in particular has been through quite a period of employment attrition. They've lost a lot of people in the last year, and we've heard from many quarters that pretty much all applications are taking longer than the stated timeline. But all we can, when we announce what happens next in terms of the approach, either continuing where we are or applying under a new system, then we will set out at least the stated timeline, shall we say, as to what we expect. Obviously, otherwise we're second guessing what happens internally in a regulator, which we don't want to do.
We're being honest here, is that the second guessing has caused a lot of problems with share price over the last 5 weeks, and dare I say again this morning, whilst we've been sitting drinking coffee. So I'm just looking for, dare I say, a clearer picture on the facts that we do know. And if I can use it by way of an example, is the RNS came out regarding the delay, the word. You yourself tweeted earlier in the week, and if you actually look at the 2 points of information, I could actually ask, was your tweet a fact? Because it was different to the RNS. So there's a case of the RNS saying we're in delay, you saying we're going. Can we just bring them together?
Well, yeah, the purpose of the tweet, of course, was to recognise the deal that Nimbus had done with Takeda, And it is unquestionable that we are on a process to the clinic. That tweet was not seeking to put any kind of a timeline on the process. So I actually don't think that I said anything which was at variance from the company position.
I'm just saying that it just seems to muddy the water in the fact that one is not giving any information other than the delay. One is saying we are proceeding, continuing. All I'm saying is if we get a clearer statement from SAREUM when they announce things. That's really my main point.
Okay.
I think that's a main point for a lot of investors.
I think one of the difficulties, of course, for us is that the timelines are out of our hands to a large extent. So once we've made our submission to the regulatory authorities, there is a statutory time by which they're meant to respond. And actually, MHRA exceeded that statutory time. Not our fault, but very frustrating to us and to our shareholders, I'm sure. So there are plans, there are estimated timelines, but they are unfortunately by definition woolly because it's out of our control. We're reliant on other people.
Appreciate that. All I'm asking is for a little bit more, dare I say, announcing how we announce things.
Okay.
I'm in building planning applications. You literally get 8 weeks regulating to pass plans. They literally say if you don't accept an extension, we'll refuse it. So I know how it all works. Which is what I'm asking is for us to sell ourselves a little bit better, be a little bit clearer in our statements.
Understood.
We'll do our best.
Yeah.
Sorry, back right.
Yeah, I think it seems clearly quite a hot space, particularly given, as you said, particularly this week, which is upfront loaded, right, which is really nice. I wonder though, are we at fear of being outcompeted? I recognise it's probably a very large space. And recognise to your comment on that, but are we? And I just really recognise the progress that's made by Ventix, the US listed Ventix as well, which is making huge progress. Has raised vast amounts of VC, is moving fast. So I'm just worried, are we being out-competed, given the delay and given that others are now making quite significant progress into the clinic as well?
Sure. So shall I take it? Yeah. So the two leading TYK2 products are deucravacitinib from BMS and the Nimbus compound we've just been talking about. So they are both pure TYK2 inhibitors targeting the allosteric site. So we've adopted a slightly different approach with our dual TYK2 JAK1 product. So we've got a slightly different TYK inhibition JAK inhibition profile. So I think that there'll be autoimmune disease areas where this dual profile is more suitable, and that there'll be some others where the single TYK2 activity is good or if not preferable. So I think that there's space for us on that basis. So and then I think really the early clinical data will indicate how competitive we are going to be. Well, certainly in psoriasis and potentially give a lead into other indications as well. But I think there's a long list of autoimmune indications that where a TYK or TYK-JAK inhibitor would work very well. So I think that there is plenty of space. We're not too concerned about being over-competed. And I think the leading products are doing a great job in validating the target, because certainly when we first started looking at TYK2, we had trouble getting traction amongst the big pharma companies because it was an area that nobody was working on and hadn't been validated. So I'm perhaps grateful is too strong a word, but certainly the likes of BMS have done a lot in validating TYK2 as a good target area.
Stephen, if I could just interject, if I could just ask you to repeat.
Sorry, it's just a second. Sorry.
If I could just ask you to repeat the questions, just it's quite faint picking the people up
Okay,
in the back of the room. Just in brief, if you'd be so kind, sir. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
You can summarise the question.
The question was, given the increasing competitive activity in the TYK2 space, are we being outcompeted? So did you have another question to follow up? Or?
Yeah, I would agree with the joint vision. The TYK2 with a JAK, this is where it's spoke. Is there any clinical validation for that particular dual inhibition?
Yes. So
and where would you see that condition?
Yeah. So Pfizer have.
So before you answer,
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Apologies for this. The question was: is there any clinical support for the joint TIC2 JAK1 approach that we're taking? Tim's about to answer.
Yes, thank you. Yes, so Pfizer have, or had actually, they've moved it on. I'll come on to that in a bit. A molecule called brepocitinib, which has a dual TIC2 JAK1 profile, very similar to ours. So they've done phase 2s in psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis, and they're looking at dermatomyositis and lupus. So they've put the molecule out into a single asset company that they've part funded called Proivant. So they sort of own it, but they've sort of put it off to one side at the moment. But yeah, there's clinical validation for that dual TIC2 JAK1 approach.
Yeah, so I go a little bit back timeline-wise with my question, because I believe if we don't know and if we don't learn from history, we won't necessarily be sure of the future. So we haven't heard what are the reasons behind that the authorities have not approved our file here in the UK. And so it is important to hear from SAREUM what are the reasons that you got to know about not approving the file, and have SAREUM been an exception in that, or have been other cases, and are there any similarities?
I'll take it.
Good question, Steve.
Yeah. Yes. So Steve, yes. Do you want? Oh, yes.
Sorry. Yes. The question was, what was the basis for the MHRA refusing the CTA?
Yeah. So I suppose the level of detail we're going into at present is that they seek an additional review of part of the preclinical package. Now we're confident that there's a good solid package behind that submission. MHRA have requested that their GLP monitoring authority also examine the data, and that's the stage we are at the moment in working out the path to get the UK GLP to prove that data. So I think that's really that's the level of detail that we obviously know chapter and verse of what's going on.
How does it come at this stage? I mean, after submitted,
well,
normally
yes.
there are conditions, requirements, restatements,
indeed,
and
yes.
all that. So.
Yeah. So this came as a surprise to us. We really weren't expecting it. Yeah. I mean, we were kind of.
Yeah. That's my question. Are we an exception here? I mean, are anyone surprised?
Well, anecdotally, I mean, we have no firm evidence of this, but anecdotally, we understand that there have been other companies that had the same situation. I think that there's a degree to which, I mean, the MHRA is effectively being reborn and reinvented as a self-standing UK regulator. And there are certainly some people in the UK that would like to see a whole new book of rules adopted for the new way that the UK is doing things. My personal view, of course, is that health and pharmaceuticals is above all a global industry, and if we put ourselves too far away from the mainstream, then the future may not be as rosy as it would like to be. But that's straying into politics, and I don't want to do that. But I think that there is a degree to which this is part of the MHRA's process of working out how it handles things.
Yeah.
In its new guise.
But unless you communicate to the market and to us who are the others, then we ought to believe that there has been no others, because we see in the market, we hear about the acquisitions, we hear about the transactions. You mentioned them already in your RNS. So on the other side, we need also to hear from SAREUM who has been the others, if any others. That's why.
Well, but that information is not in the public domain.
Exactly.
Yeah. So they may well be private companies who wouldn't necessarily wouldn't have to announce those. Yeah.
NHRA doesn't put out a a list of who's succeeded and
No,
who
but,
hasn't
you know,
succeeded.
companies publish as we do publish.
Well, not the private ones. Yeah.
Fortunately not.
So if any would be private.
Well, we'd think so. Yeah. I mean, we haven't seen any announcements from listed companies.
That's what we haven't seen.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, so we don't know what the names of these companies are. You know, I suppose our sources probably aren't at liberty to divulge the names anyway. But yeah, so I mean that because we've not seen anything in the market, our inference is that these are private companies.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, these are anecdotal reports. So, Roger.
Yeah, I mean, little knowledge is a dangerous thing here. Did I understand you, Tim, to say that we're going head to head with Pfizer on a combined TYK? Never know how you pronounce it.
Yes, TIC2 JAK1. Yeah.
Jack, did I hear you right saying we're going head to head with Pfizer?
Well, I suppose in terms of the profile of the molecule, ours is closer to the now ex-Pfizer molecule than it is to the BMS or the Nimbus molecules. Yeah.
Okay. Would I be right in picking up that given these unexpected delays in getting approval, management time has obviously been focused on that, and that there will therefore naturally be a delay in 1802? Am I right in assuming that?
No, I wouldn't think.
I'll address that. No, I mean, we are absolutely focused on getting regulatory approval for SDC 1801. We're working with a development company to get us through that process. So we still have time to progress 1802, but that's still going ahead on the schedule we've been working to.
So can we just explore, Tim was referring to us when we were talking about 737, and could we just tease out, is us the Pioneer Fund, or is us SAREUM, and just how you anticipate that is they going?
Sorry, can I just check? Are you hearing that question better?
Yeah, that question was fine, sir. Thank you. No
Excellent.
need to repeat. Thank
Just
you.
a soft spoken out of the back. Just to remind you, of course, that the ownership of 737 is the Cancer Pioneer Fund has 72.5%, and we have 27.5%. And of course, the license agreement was directly between CPF and what is now Sierra Oncology, and our interest in that came through a side agreement direct with CPF to cover the economics. So in terms of the legal flows, it's to and from with CPF, and any future deal that is done will be with CPF. They have engaged with us, however, to discuss the situation, and we are talking actively about future directions. And we have been approached, both. I mean, I personally have been approached on a couple of occasions. I know that some approaches have gone into CPF as well. But as Tim rightly said before, until we get the documents and the data back, which will not be before January, then there's nothing that any of us can do in that regard other than to create an orderly queue.
Okay. I mean, presumably there is a kind of a formal agreement between SAREUM and CPF, kind of a joint venture type agreement.
Covering the economic interests, yes.
Yeah. Could I just say, in fact, I think it was a question I asked your predecessor 10 years ago. when you asked Peel Hunt as to why there are no institutional shareholders on the register, what is the answer you get from Peel Hunt?
I think that they would probably start by showing you the entire sector performance in the last 12 months, which has been absolutely dismal. I mean, there's no beating about the bush here. I mean, any pharmaceutical biotech investment that you have is almost certainly got red ink all over it. And sadly, we are absolutely in the midst of that. There seems to be controlled, shall we say, appetite by the institutions to look at development stage companies at the moment. But we also know that these windows open as well as shut, and that next time around, when the window opens, hopefully we will be in a much better position to take advantage of that because of the increasing communications that there are between Peel Hunt and indeed Hybridan and institutions.
If I could ask a more philosophical question, I mean, you highlight in the annual reports the principal risks of the company.
Yes.
I mean, a risk that I fully recognise in the 15 years I've been as a shareholder is what I would call not a single man risk, double man risk. I mean, you know, what happens if Tim and his motorbike have an unfortunate affair, or you know, John has a size of trouble around the world. I mean, but seriously, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, this is a risk that we accept, or at least I accept, and I don't want to think about the consequences. But isn't it a risk that should be highlighted in the annual report?
One for you, Clive.
I mean, it's a good point. We do insure our key men, so we certainly recognise that, and hopefully we mitigate against a catastrophic impact on the business. But you're right, it's a good point, isn't it? You know, and John and Tim in particular are absolutely crucial to the future of our products because their knowledge is extraordinary.
But I think short term, yeah, I can stand in for John, yeah, or John and Stephen can stand in for me. So you know, if the worst to happen, you know, we can cover the eventuality short term while we look for any replacements.
Yeah, I think it's probably also worth adding that over the course of the last year, the board has started discussing succession planning rather more actively than it has before. We're none of us getting younger.
Yeah.
But you're getting wiser.
Well, let's hope so. Let's hope so. So was there another question at the back?
Yeah. So regarding the CRO partner,
Yes.
Is it fair to assume you're using the same partner as you have 1801? And are you worried, given what's happened with 1801, or something similar? Yeah, it's regarding the partner.
No, well, 1802 is still preclinical. So
okay, so you haven't yet
no,
no.
no. I mean, they may be listening, so I don't want to speak too kindly about them because they'll put their prices up. But I would anticipate we would certainly consider the same partner.
Okay.
They did nothing wrong. You know, I think that's quite important to state. So.
The secret to success is never tripping over the same rock twice. So let's hope people will be wiser with 1802. So, question there.
So just going back to the 737.
Yes.
I'm probably incorrect, but did SAREUM take out any patents on the data that they've sent back to you?
Yes. They haven't sent data back yet. Just to be clear. Did you get the question?
If you could repeat that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Did SAREUM take out any patents in its own right covering 737? And the answer is yes. And they returned to us as part of that package.
You take that patent.
Yes.
I believe they're patent applications as well. I'm not sure anything's granted yet.
Yeah. Well, and the clinical data that won't get patented.
No, the clinical data.
Yeah. That's not subject.
It doesn't just put restriction on something that you cannot.
No. We get absolutely everything back.
Yeah. Richard?
Just going to continue on the 737 thread. With the Pioneer Fund owning 72.5%, that's obviously a controlling majority. If we wanted to do something with 737, could they stop us?
I would imagine that would be a negotiation with them.
Yeah.
But unlikely.
They need a solution as much as we need a solution. So I think that all of these conversations, all the conversations so far have been constructive, and I'm quite sure that will continue to be so. So were there any other questions? Yes, sir.
Regarding 1801,
yes.
What is the possibility of trying to get the CTA approval not just in the UK but in other countries at the same time?
Why not do that?
It's possible. Yeah, I mean, and at the moment we are pursuing in parallel several courses of action. So we're continuing with MHRA, of course. We're looking at a European authority, and we're looking at an overseas, I'll just say overseas for now, authority, non-European. And until a compelling reason comes to drop one of those strands, we'll continue with the three.
If there are no other questions in the room, yes, sir.
One final question. Obviously, we consolidated the shares.
We did.
In hindsight, looking at the performance this year, is that a wise decision?
Well, timing is everything, and but having said that, I don't think there is anything particularly to suggest that our performance would have been any better if we hadn't consolidated. It is, after all, it's a mathematical treatment, and not much more than that. So I mean, it would be lovely to say if only we hadn't done that, but I think that, as I say, we would be in a similar performance boat, irrespective. Is my view. So if there are no more questions in the room, and I thank you all for your questions and your contributions, I'm going to pass the baton over to. Do we have a poll result, Chris?
Yes, we do.
Oh, so in that case, if I could have that, and I'll just read the results out, and then we'll go to the online. Technology is wonderful. The online questions from there.
Well, I've got the votes. Those are there.
Thank you. Thank you. So I can start by telling you that all 6 resolutions have been carried. Resolution 1, and forgive me, I don't intend to read them out again. If you can hopefully remember what they were. This was the annual report. Votes for 8,297,025, which represents 99.87% of the vote. Against 11,023. Withheld 4,533. The second resolution, which was the appointment of auditors from memory. No, sorry, the REMCOM, I beg your pardon. For 7,274,693, which is 88.96% of the vote, against 902,951, withheld 134,937. Resolution 3, which was, I think, the auditors' re-election. Was that you?
Myself.
Oh, right. Well, John got away with it. For 8,127,306, which represents 99.15%, against 69,338, withheld 115,937. Resolution 4, which is finally at the auditors, for 7,660,155, which represents 93.66%. Against 518,753, and withheld 133,673. Resolution 5, which was the allotment, ordinary resolution, for 700,387 and 72 votes, which represents 89.52%. Against 864,630, withheld 60,879. Then resolution 6, which was the special resolution, for 7,357,844, which represents 89.17%, against 893,858, and withheld 60,879. Those results will, of course, be posted on an RNS later in the day. So you can see the numbers from there.
Mr. Chairman, can I just make a comment? I was very pleased to see that you had a voter turnout of 12%. I mean, I think in previous AGMs it's been 3 to 4%. So
Indeed.
I think anyway, congratulations.
Moving.
I mean, Tim and John used to control the company.
Moving in the right direction.
Moving
Yes.
in the right direction.
Exactly. Thank you for that. Much appreciated. So with that, I'm going to pass the baton to our newly appointed head of IR, Alex Harrison, who is going to act as the quizmaster for the online questions. Alex, over to you.
Thank you, Stephen, and I hope everybody can hear me. So the first question that I will put to you is, how long is the review by GLP likely to take?
The short answer is we don't know. And I alluded to it earlier, we're reliant on other people to do that. So the processes at MHRA have to request for that review to take place from the UK GLP Monitoring Authority. And then the review needs to occur. And all I can say is at the moment, that has not begun.
Next one is, has the MHRA acted outside of normal guidelines so far as refusal of the CTA? If not, how has the additional requirements been missed by yourselves and the so-called internationally recognized CROs?
So it's to do with a portion of the data. They're querying the process by which that data was generated. And so they're not querying the data itself, they're querying the process. And I think the fact that they're asking the UK GLP Monitoring Authority to review suggests that they have some concerns about the whether the studies were done under GLP conditions. So we believe they were. There were inspection certificates in place, current at the time that the experiments took place. But MHRA have clearly got some issues with that, and they would like the UK GLP authority to review that data, to look at the processes that were in place when that data was collected, and to say yes or no, hopefully yes. But so I think it's important to say, it's not the data itself that they have any issues with. They're not querying the results of any experiments. They're not questioning the data we presented, but it's to do with the process by which that data was gathered.
Thank you. So also on 1801, if you're confident of CTA approval, why would you consider at cost overseas applications?
So we're looking for the quickest route to the clinic. I mean, it's important to say, but we're also we're only talking to good, high quality clinical units and high quality regulatory authorities. Okay, so we want to be quick, but we're going to still do a thoroughly excellent job of the clinical study. And at the moment, while the timelines are woolly or indistinct, we're looking at alternatives to MHRA because MHRA might take a long time. They took I've said already, they took slightly over their statutory time limits to consider our application. That could happen again, and we just want to hedge against that, in essence, by looking at other territories.
Great. So this one's on 737. When do you expect to receive the clinical study report data pack for 737? And how long do you expect your evaluation of these reports to take before going forward with the project? Have you or Cancer Research UK received any interest for 737 from any other company or interested party? I know, Stephen, you've alluded to that, but
yeah. So I mean, the process as we understand it, because we haven't really been around this path before, is that as soon as the formal termination date comes up, which is early January, then Sierra/GSK return the packages, quote, without delay, unquote. So we'd expect, I suppose soon after, low number of weeks, hopefully, but I think it's difficult to second guess that. And then really the review period is, I mean, it's kind of difficult. Again, yeah, I mean, I think, you know, it may take more than a day. It shouldn't take more than a month. I think is that about right? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they're pretty solid documents, aren't they?
Yeah.
So there's quite a lot to wade through, but obviously, you know, that'll be a priority for us. Yes, I think those are, you know, the timelines are roughly, I think, you know, some low number of weeks to get the data, you know, a low number of weeks to review it.
It will depend to some extent on how much SAREUM have trawled through that data as well, because there's quite a lot of genetic information taken for each of the patients in that study. And so, you know, there could be a correlation between the genetic background of patients and their response to treatment. And at this moment, we don't have a good feeling for how much SAREUM have dug into that. You know, if they provide us with a nice report correlating genetic background of patients with the outcomes, fabulous, we can read that through quickly. But if they haven't done that, we'll want to do that ourselves, because I think that's important. You know, if we can see a clear signal for patients who responded or who didn't respond, that's a very key piece of information that will help us to develop that project, or, you know, whoever takes the project on will be looking through that data. So it's hard to say until we actually see what's coming back to CPF. But I think a guide of between a day to, I think it probably take more than a day, but between a day and a month is yeah.
Thank you. In terms of our JAK kinase, do we still have best-in-class potential, as mentioned in the final results, or are there now competitors with a better product?
I mean, we have best-in-class potential. So the compound that Tim mentioned, brepocitinib, that Pfizer had and are now working in partnership with Priovant, can be improved, and I think our molecule has some potential to improve upon that molecule. You know, it's absolutely key that we get it into the clinic, because the preclinical studies are not going to differentiate the molecules. It's all about the, you know, the safety profile and the efficacy profile. And until we get phase 1A, which will give us the safety data, and phase 1B, which will hopefully give us some efficacy signal, that might be biomarker, it might be disease modification, but then we'll be able to compare to Pfizer's report on brepocitinib from their phase 1 studies, and we'll be able to look for differences and hope that we're going to see some benefits from our molecule.
I mean, the next question is very much linked. So do you believe there are likely to be any potential points of differentiation of SDC 1801 versus brepocitinib, i.e. a molecule with the same mechanism, TYK2 JAK1 affinity?
Yeah, I mean, the key thing is the shades of JAK selectivity and then any off-target activity that might be in the molecule. So we believe that brepocitinib has some JAK2 inhibition. It's hard to define or measure exactly, but some JAK2 activity, which may be causing some of the side effects that they see. So reduction in reticulocytes is the main one. So these are early red blood cells. So progenitors of red blood cells are called reticulocytes, and Pfizer do see some reduction in reticulocytes at the higher doses, and that's dose limiting. So they went up to, I think they went up to certainly beyond 100 mg dose in their phase 1 trials, and I believe they're currently using a 30 mg dose in their phase 3 and phase 2 trials. So you know, we may see a reduced effect on reticulocytes. Again, yeah, until we get in the clinic, it's very difficult to be precise about these things, but we have less JAK2 activity. So we may see less effect on reticulocytes, which would allow us to dose higher, which would allow us to increase or improve on the efficacy that Pfizer have demonstrated. So there's absolutely potential. Then, you know, off-target effects. Pfizer reported on brepocitinib that there is some activity on a transporter called OCT2. Okay, so it's a renal transporter. It affects the transport of creatinine, and they did see some increases in creatinine levels in some of the subjects in their phase 1, which may be due to that. So we have less effect on that particular renal transporter from in vitro studies, and so there's a potential benefit of our molecule there. Yeah. Conversely, there may be something that we haven't seen about our molecule that could cause a side effect, and that's why it's, we've just got to get it in the clinic and try it and see what happens. We've done all the preclinical studies to show the safety. We're not expecting that we hit anything off target. We've looked, screened against other targets and not seen anything. But until you get it in the clinic, you might miss something. So that's what needs to happen.
Thank you. Back to 1801, what is the commercial reason you don't disclose the CROs? These obviously play a large part in the progress of SAREUM, and MHRA has now questioned their progress. Sorry, their processes, sorry.
So yeah, I mean, so we are deliberately coy about which CROs we use, which countries they operate in, for a number of commercial reasons. I suppose one is if there's a problem with a particular CRO unrelated to what we're doing, but maybe with some other work they're doing, we don't want to be tainted by that brush. Similarly, if there's sort of issues arising from the countries they operate in, again, unrelated to us, but we can still get tainted by that brush. And what we really can't be doing is giving our competitors any snippets of information, or to try and to talk our molecules down when they're having discussions with their potential partners. So we are, I suppose, deliberately vague about who we're working with and where they operate. Except that they're world leading CROs in fully inspected laboratories. So these are high class operators. We just, for commercial reasons, don't disclose who and where.
Thank you. Given there are at least 5 TYK2 inhibitors in clinical development and 2 others in late preclinical at well-funded US VC companies, what do you consider to be the best way to create a differentiated target product profile for SDC 1801 and make this attractive prospect to a potential partner?
Yeah, I think alludes to a question from a gentleman in the room here about outcompeted. I mean, my feeling is that we're not being outcompeted in terms of molecule profile, but we perhaps are in terms of psoriasis, for example. So there's an awful lot of treatments coming through for psoriasis at the moment. So we'll be looking to position SDC 1801 against a different disease. However, that said, our plan is to do the phase 1b trial in psoriasis patients. The reason being, patients are available, so you can recruit to your trial quite readily. And psoriasis is biologically driven by the kinds of pathways that we're going to be impacting on. So we would expect to see some certainly biomarker-driven signal of efficacy. And it's a very good proof of concept disease for our molecule. Bearing in mind that our business model is to partner at late preclinical or early clinical stage, we want to provide a package of data with patient data in there to a partner who's going to develop a molecule and take it into market. And my suspicion is they will look at different diseases to psoriasis. Yeah, we may get an absolutely fabulous result in these psoriasis patients, and it becomes compelling to take it forward in that patient population. But my suspicion is at the moment that they'll be looking for different therapeutic areas which respond best to the inhibition of TYK2 and JAK1. And there are several that might be considered for that.
Okay, great. Just to follow up, just to be clear, have SAREUM or CRUK received any interest from any parties with respect to progressing 737?
Well, we already addressed that, so the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, can't give any. one more question, which was submitted in advance. What would the board say to potential investors to convert interest into real investment?
Well, I would say that there's a combination here of several products, any one of which coming through will be absolutely transformative, both in terms of patient benefit, but and also, and perhaps in that context, more importantly, in terms of the financial future of the company. And that we remain, and we have always been, but we absolutely remain very confident that despite, say, the few rocks in the road we've seen in this latter part of the year, that we are well positioned to move products forward to a point where they can be taken up and by major pharma companies, and there are some very meaningful commercial discussions to be had with them as part of that process. So I think that the product portfolio at the moment is attractive, and hopefully will become more so as we succeed in getting into the clinic.
Great. Thank you. So I think that I've tried, obviously there's quite a lot of duplication in some of the questions and from the floor live today. So hopefully that represents most of the questions, and any others we will respond to through the portal.
Very good. Well, thank you, and thank you everybody for your contributions. I would just, as I say, remind you that there will be an RNS posted with the formal results of the votes today. But I'd like to thank all of you, whether you're online or you've managed to overcome the transport difficulties and actually come here today. We really do appreciate your active view and the active role that you take in this company. We are always pleased to hear from you, especially when the criticism is constructive, but we are always pleased to hear from you. And do please keep up your support of the company and of the team here. And we look forward to seeing you, if not before, at next year's AGM. So with that, I'll formally close the business of the meeting. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you to the board of SAREUM for updating attendees this morning. Can I please ask attendees online not to close this session, as we'll now automatically redirect you for the opportunity to provide your feedback in order that the board can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete, but I'm sure will be greatly appreciated by the company. On behalf of the board of SAREUM Holdings PLC, we'd like to thank you for attending today's annual general meeting. Good morning to you all.